Punishments. Throughout the centuries, the punishment of the horse has been one of the most controversial aspects of the art of riding. The ancient Greeks tried to understand the mentality of their horses to educate them with kindness. Xenophon in the 400 BC wrote, "Young horses should be trained in such a way that they not only love their riders, but look forward to the time that they are with them." Contrary to this attitude, the riding masters of the Middle Ages employed very rough methods, thinking that the punishment proved to be the best method of education. They did not even try to make their horses submit by normal treatment. The aim of their training was the subjection of the horse. In order to make them obey, the horses were subjected to every sort of punishment. And it was of no concern to the trainers how many horses were spoiled or broken down in the course of their training. The cruel bits and other instruments of torture employed in those days and exhibited in museums are proof of this fact. Pluvinel, at the beginning of the 17th century, was the first riding master to oppose these methods, and he started a campaign against his contemporaries, especially against de la Brue, a campaign which at first seemed to be fruitless. But after his death, those more humane methods were accepted and prepared the ground for instruction of Gonier. Anyone today reading a de la Brue's advice on how to treat a horse that ran away would find his hair standing on end. And yet contemporaries placed de la Brue's methods far above those of Pluvinel. Luckily for the reputation of the art of riding, Pluvinel and Gonier had many followers who influenced the teaching throughout the years that followed. This not only saved the art of riding, but proved the great benefit to the horse. With the general decline of culture in this century, which has influenced the art of riding, punishment of the horse has crept back into the system of training. There are riders today who attribute greater importance to punishment than of the correctness of the aids. Some of the exhibitions that may be witnessed in public are horrifying and make one wonder what extent such scenes occur in private. Without doubt, any punishment is wrong if the knowledgeable onlooker is unable to understand for what reason the punishment is administered. And in such a case, how should the horse know why he is being punished? The rider with high ambitions and little knowledge will be more inclined to revert to punishment than will the more experienced rider. He will try to obtain by force what he cannot achieve by the correct use of the aids as taught by the classical school. This is not to say that when dealing with a difficult horse, the required standard can always be achieved without punishment. But for the welfare of the horse and honor of equitation, punishment should be restricted to what is necessary for education. The value of punishment should never be overrated and employed as a substitute for correct aids. Before administering punishment, the thinking rider should ask himself 3 questions. 1. Is punishment necessary? If there is any doubt, it is better to postpone it than to be unjust. 2. What kind of punishment is appropriate and to what degree should it be applied? 3. When should punishment be applied? With reference to 1, before administering punishment, the rider must be sure that the horse is disobedient and not that he has misunderstood or been unable to follow his rider's command. This decision is most important. To punish a horse when he has not understood a command or is unable to carry it out would shake his confidence in his rider and interfere with his progress in training. Moreover, unjust punishment or punishment which is not understood may lead to opposition. If the horse becomes aware of his strength, he will measure his power against that of his rider, a situation to be avoided at all costs. On no account must a horse be punished if he is afraid, as then the fear of the punishment would be added to the fear of the object that frightened him. 2. The rider must have an exact knowledge of temperament and sensitiveness of his horse. He must also take into consideration the horse's intelligence and the degree of training that he has reached. Only when he has considered these points can he decide the appropriate punishment. It will be necessary to apply more severe punishment to dull and lazy horses than to those that are temperamental or overeager. With the latter, an increased aid may suffice as a punishment. Sufficient punishment to meet the purpose will improve the training, whereas the punishment that is too rough or ill-controlled will do the reverse. 3. With children and horses, the punishment must immediately follow the disobedience or its effect will be lost. Neither will understand why he is being punished in the evening if the fault was committed in the morning. If the rider is unable to administer punishment immediately, he should not do it at all. No punishment is better than punishment that is unjust or not understood. If a rider has been unseated by a bucking horse, there is no point in punishing this horse when he has scrambled back into the saddle and regained his stirrups. Unless the punishment is immediate, the horse will not realize what it is for. A selection of punishments is at the disposal of the rider, and he must choose the one that is most suitable. If the horse refuses to go forward, the rider has a choice of legs, spurs, riding whip, or long whip. If he refuses to reduce his speed, a jerk of the reins may be required. But the top limit of punishment must be used only when the others have failed. As mentioned above, aids can be increased until they reach the degree of punishment. This applies especially to the leg aids. If the horse does not respond to a light pressure of the leg, the pressure must be increased until finally the spur is used. Care must be taken when using the spur that the rider does not take his legs away from the horse's sides, as then a sudden movement of the horse on feeling the spur might cause the rider to lose his seat and would find himself in a position in which he would be unable to benefit by the success obtained by the spur. The punishment would lose its effect and the horse would be the victor. As a punishment, the spur should be applied with a short action behind the girth, the rider maintaining the same position as when applying his legs firmly. The spur should not be used too far behind the girth, as this might induce the horse to kick or buck. If he kicks against the spurs, they must be immediately applied again in the same spot. This must be repeated until the horse accepts punishment without opposition. Horses treated in this manner will, after a short while, no longer react against the spur. When using the spur, the rider must consider its sharpness and sensitiveness to his horse. He should never use spurs with such force that they draw blood, and their application should cease the moment the horse has responded. The foregoing remark applies to all punishment and to great extent to all aids. The rider must never forget that the spur, whether used as a punishment or as an aid, is the last resort. It is not easy to distinguish between the use of riding whip as an aid or as a punishment. A light tap will be considered an aid, whereas a sharp stroke would be implied as a punishment. When used as a punishment, the whip should generally be applied on the spot on which the aids are used, that is to say, immediately behind the girth. On rare occasions, it may be used on the shoulder, but never on the neck or the head. In cases of particular insubordination, the rider should take the reins firmly in his left hand and deal an energetic blow behind the girth with the whip on his right hand. This represents the highest degree of punishment and should be administered only on rare occasions when the behavior of the horse justifies it. Otherwise, the horse would become frightened or cease to respect it. This type of punishment is best not applied in public. When necessary, however, it is more effective to administer one good blow than repeated less severe strokes. The application of the long whip is similar to that of the riding whip. The trainer should use it only on rare occasions as a means of punishment. If the horse, instead of going forward upon the use of the whip, insists on stopping or tries to kick against the rider, the moment has come when the long whip must be used as a punishment in order to make the horse respect it as an aid. He should be dealt with a few sharp strokes with the end of the lash until he stops kicking and goes forward. Once more, the use of the long whip as punishment must be reserved for an emergency, because, even more than with spurs, the long whip is the last resort. Its use is the declaration of war, and the trainer should begin this fight only if he is sure of victory. Once he has started the fight, he must carry it through to a successful end. The whip should never be used on the forehand, neck, or head. It should not be applied to the hindquarters from above downwards, as this would likely provoke kicking. The horse should be punished with the end of the lash in an upward direction. After punishment, steps should be taken to restore the horse's confidence. The trainer should approach the horse with the whip behind his back and speak with him, caress him, and show with the whip, and finally stroke him with the handle. He should step back a few steps and encourage the horse to come to him. In this manner, the horse will not lose his confidence in the whip. A horse that is frightened of the whip and tries to run away from it proves that the whip has been used in an incorrect manner. Another punishment that should be rarely, if ever, used is a jerk with the reins. If the horse fails to respond to any giving and taking action of the rein, or to an energetic half halt, or if he lies on the reins with all of his weight, or tries to run away, he may be given a sharp, unilateral action on one rein. But there is a danger that this conduct may disturb his contact with the bit and have a bad effect on the hind legs. One of the milder punishments with an intelligent horse is to repeat the exercise until it is finally successful. Repeated halts will be the best punishment for the horse that tries to run away from the rider's aids. Remember, though, that these halts, if executed too sharply, would be harmful, especially if employed with young horses. The rein back is another useful punishment, but it must not be prolonged, as it would create pain in the hind legs and cause evasions from the horse. Even speaking sharply may serve as a punishment with some horses. In all cases, it is most important that punishments may be brought to an end the moment success has been achieved. Punishment followed by reward will increase confidence of the horse. It is hardly necessary to state that punishment must never be administered from temper or because the rider is in a bad humor. The rider should never forget that horses have long memories and are easily frightened. Every effort must be made to keep their confidence. As Xenophon said, punishment should never be given in anger, because action committed in anger will later be regretted. Nearly 2,400 years later, the directions for cavalry of the Austrian army read, "Punishment must never be administered in anger." The rider must always show himself superior to the horse in mental and physical self-control. Submission to his will should not be brought by force, but by his superior intelligence.